The Galactic Council had spoken. Their decree was absolute, their words final. A transmission echoed across the stars, relayed through the grand relay networks that linked the countless civilizations under their dominion. The message was crisp, devoid of emotion, and layered with the kind of arrogance that only those who had ruled unchallenged for millennia could muster. Underscore. Humans of soul. Your struggle is meaningless. Your defiance is irrational. You cannot win. Underscore. To them, it was not a threat. It was a statement of fact. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had shaped the destiny of the cosmos, dictating which species would rise and which would fall. They had seen the pattern repeat itself too many times to entertain the possibility of deviation. Young civilizations, bold in their ignorance, always believed they could resist the order of things. They all thought themselves different, special. And so the Council had watched humanity with the same detached amusement they reserved for all upstart species. The humans expanded into the void faster than expected, spreading across the stars like wildfire, their primitive warships carving out colonies at the edges of explored space. They were reckless, unpredictable, and uncomfortably efficient in their methods. The Council took note. Then came the first violations, human vessels straying into protected territories, disregarding protocols that had been in place for eons. They dismantled derelict Council stations, reverse engineering forbidden technology without permission. Worse still, they refused to acknowledge the authority of the governing body that had long since ruled the known galaxy. Warnings were sent. Humanity ignored them. That was when the Council convened, a gathering of the most powerful minds from 1,000 worlds. They had seen enough. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was to be pacified, as all defiant species before them had been. The decree was sent, and with it, the weight of inevitability. Underscore. You are an anomaly. An unstable force in a galaxy that thrives on order. You are not the first to resist, nor will you be the last to fall. Surrender, and you will be integrated. Refuse, and you will be erased. Underscore. To the Council, it was a mercy. They did not see themselves as conquerors, but as stewards of civilization. Every species that had stood against them had either been shattered or absorbed, their defiance reduced to mere footnotes in history. This was the natural order of things. And yet, something about humanity unsettled them. There was no immediate response to the decree. No desperate plea for negotiation. No last-minute attempt to comply. For days, the human channels remained silent, their leaders offering no reaction at all. The Council took this as a sign of quiet acceptance. They were wrong. The reply came not through diplomatic channels, but as a simple broadcast, repeated on every known frequency. No titles, no official insignia. Just the unmistakable voice of a human, calm and deliberate. Underscore. We hear you. Underscore. Underscore. We understand. Underscore. Underscore. And we take it personally. Underscore. That was it. No declarations of war. No boasts of victory. Just a quiet, undeniable statement of intent. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Council felt something it had never experienced before. Doubt. The Galactic Council did not hesitate. Their decision had been made, their will absolute. A fleet was dispatched without delay, a force unmatched in scale and technological superiority. It was not meant to be a war. War implied resistance, a struggle between equals. This was to be a demonstration, a lesson carved into the fabric of reality. The first wave of ships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, their hulls gleaming in the light of an unfamiliar sun. Battleships larger than cities, carriers bristling with strike craft, escorts designed to dismantle resistance before it could form. The sheer weight of their presence was enough to end most conflicts before they began. Humanity did not surrender. Instead, the fleet was met with silence. No diplomatic attempts, no desperate negotiations, nothing but empty space and distant sensor ghosts flickering at the edge of detection. It was an anomaly, but not one the Council forces considered a threat. After all, what could a fledgling race with barely a century of interstellar experience hope to accomplish? They advanced, fanning out in formation, scanning for threats that did not exist. Then, without warning, the first ship went dark. No explosion. No impact. Just silence. A moment later, another followed. Then another. Entire wings of Council vessels drifted lifelessly, their systems failing without explanation. Communications collapsed into fragmented static. Officers barked orders, attempting to re-establish control, but the chaos spread too quickly. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. Humanity had never intended to fight them conventionally. That was the mistake the Council had made. They assumed their war was the only kind that could be waged. They were prepared for grand fleet engagements, for formations and tactics refined over millennia. They were not prepared for the methodical dissection of their forces before a single shot was fired. Human strike teams had infiltrated their supply chains weeks before the fleet arrived. Intelligence operatives embedded themselves within trade routes, listening, watching, learning. Every vulnerability was catalogued. Every weakness exploited. The moment the fleet crossed into human space, the trap was already closing. Electronic warfare systems, built in secrecy, unleashed a silent onslaught. Council ships, reliant on centralized networks, found their systems overridden. Entire command structures collapsed as false orders were issued through hijacked channels. Automated defenses turned against their own fleets. Weapons systems shut down mid-charge. Then the real attacks began. Human vessels did not engage in direct combat. They struck from nowhere, packs of small, fast-moving warships darting in and out of real space, targeting critical subsystems, vanishing before retaliation could be mustered. Torpedoes carrying electromagnetic pulses crippled shielding arrays. Boarding craft latched onto hulls, their occupants forcing entry through brute efficiency. Council Marines, trained in ceremonial warfare, found themselves locked in brutal, close-quarters combat against enemies who fought not for honor, but to kill as quickly as possible. It was not a battle. It was a dissection. The Council commanders, for all their arrogance, were not fools. They attempted to retreat, to regroup, to make sense of what was happening. But wherever they fled, humanity was waiting. For every ship that fell, new tactics emerged. Humans learned, adapted, improved. The same tricks never worked twice. What the Council had dismissed as disorderly, reckless aggression was, in truth, an evolving response, a fluid, ever-changing dance of destruction. Then came the transmissions. Intercepted distress calls, looping endlessly, broadcasting not just to other Council fleets, but back to their homeworlds. Their own soldiers' final screams echoed through their networks, their last words recorded, analyzed, and replayed. It was not just war, it was psychological dismantling. And at the heart of it all, a single message repeated through every frequency. Underscore. You cannot win. Underscore. The same words the Council had declared, now thrown back at them. For the first time in history, an armada sent to pacify a lesser species did not return victorious. It did not return at all. The loss of the fleet was not just a military failure, it was an event that shook the very foundations of the Galactic Council. No species had ever done this. No species had ever forced them to recognize the possibility of defeat. It was a mistake, they assured themselves. A miscalculation. A single engagement gone wrong. The humans had gotten lucky. That was all. A second fleet was assembled. Larger. More advanced. Commanded by the most brilliant tacticians the Council had ever produced. Every known countermeasure against human interference was implemented. Secure communications, hardened systems, fleet-wide redundancies. They would not be caught unaware again. They were. The moment their ships emerged into real space, they realized the battlefield had already shifted. Humanity was no longer waiting to defend their borders. They were attacking. Everywhere. The war the Council had expected was gone. There were no grand engagements, no decisive clashes. Instead, entire fleets vanished overnight, picked apart piece by piece. Critical supply lines disintegrated. Forward operating bases were overrun before they could even be reinforced. Planetary governors, once secure in their power, woke to find their worlds cut off, surrounded by the very species they had deemed irrelevant. Council strategists scrambled to adjust. They abandoned conventional warfare. They turned to scorched earth tactics, burning human colonies, reducing entire planets to lifeless rock to send a message. But humanity did not flinch. For every world they lost, they took 3 in return. For every ship destroyed, they built 5 more. They did not fight like a species with something to protect. They fought like a species with nothing to lose. Council forces found themselves trapped in a war they could not comprehend. The humans never struck where expected. They sabotaged fuel depots deep in enemy space. They captured Council vessels, ripped them apart, and turned their own technology against them. They infiltrated command networks, rerouted reinforcements into ambushes, made entire armadas fire upon their own allies. Time, the Council's greatest weapon, was now their enemy. Humans adapted at a pace that should have been impossible. Every engagement changed them. They learned faster than any species had a right to. Weapons that had devastated them in one battle became useless in the next. Defensive strategies that had once been impenetrable were dismantled within weeks. Fear spread. Council officers, once confident in their superiority, hesitated before issuing orders. Soldiers, conditioned to see themselves as the galaxy's rightful enforcers, began to question their place in the war. Even the high-ranking members of the Council itself grew silent, their proclamations of inevitable victory becoming less frequent. Then, the unthinkable happened. A human fleet, larger than anything previously seen, launched an assault deep into the Council's core systems. The war was no longer at the fringes of known space. It was here, at the heart of the Empire. And for the first time in history, the Council understood what it meant to be hunted. Panic gripped the Council. The illusion of control had been shattered. The humans were not just winning battles, they were dismantling the very foundation of the Galactic Order. Entire sectors fell silent, not through conquest, but through systematic disruption. Infrastructure crumbled. Trade collapsed. The once thriving arteries of interstellar civilization became lifeless voids patrolled by unseen predators. Messages from the outer territories became erratic, filled with fragmented reports of disappearing fleets, sabotaged supply lines, and Council stations abandoned overnight. Officers who once ruled through fear now whispered of ghosts in the dark, an enemy they could neither see nor predict. The Council's military doctrine, built on the assumption of overwhelming force, had no counter for an opponent that refused to engage on their terms. Desperation took hold. The Council deployed its greatest weapons, colossal dreadnoughts capable of turning entire worlds to ash. These behemoths, symbols of absolute power, advanced toward human-controlled space, each one bristling with firepower meant to wipe out resistance in a single, decisive strike. They never made it. One by one, the dreadnoughts disappeared from sensors, their signals vanishing into the abyss. Council analysts scrambled for explanations: gravitational anomalies, sensor malfunctions, sabotage. The truth was far worse. The humans had not destroyed these ships conventionally. They had taken them. Boarding teams, undetected and precise, had infiltrated the massive warships before they ever left Council space. By the time they reached the front, they were already compromised. Crews lost control, their own ships turning against them. Entire fleets watched in horror as their dreadnoughts, once symbols of invincibility, were used to spearhead the next wave of human attacks. It was no longer just war. It was humiliation. The Council's allies, once unwavering in their loyalty, began to waver. Vassal species, long kept in check through intimidation, now saw weakness in their overlords. Uprisings erupted across the galaxy, inspired by the defiance of a species that should have never been able to stand against the Council. The very order they had spent millennia constructing was crumbling, and at the center of it all, the humans pressed forward without hesitation. Every diplomatic effort to end the war was ignored. Peace offers were sent, their terms increasingly desperate, but no response came. The silence was worse than rejection. It was an unspoken message, a declaration that humanity had moved beyond the need for negotiations. The Council had made a fatal mistake when they first sent their decree. They had declared that humanity could not win. Humanity had taken that personally. The Council was collapsing. What had once been the unshakable center of galactic civilization was now a fractured remnant of its former self. The war was no longer about territory or control, it was about survival. The once mighty fleets that had ruled the stars now drifted as wreckage. The grand cities of the core worlds, symbols of millennia of dominance, stood silent, their leaders gone, their people uncertain of what came next. Fear had turned inward. The Council's own members no longer trusted each other. Accusations of treason spread as factions formed, some demanding surrender, others calling for one final stand. But there was no unity left, no singular voice to guide them. The war had changed them, broken them. The certainty they had once wielded like a weapon was gone, replaced by doubt, paranoia, and despair. Humanity, however, did not stop. They did not broadcast demands. They did not seek acknowledgement. They did not slow their advance. The war had begun with the Council's decree, but it was ending on humanity's terms. The final strongholds of the old order were falling, not to overwhelming force, but to precise, relentless dismantling. The Council had relied on structure, on the belief that order would always prevail. But order meant nothing against an enemy that had learned to thrive in chaos. The last remaining fleets gathered at the Council's homeworld, a final attempt to halt the inevitable. Every remaining warship, every last soldier, all concentrated in a single desperate stand. If they fell, the heart of the Council would be lost. If they endured, perhaps there was still a chance. It did not matter. The humans did not attack in a single, overwhelming strike. They did not come as an armada, did not engage in the grand battle the Council had prepared for. Instead, their war had already been won before the final battle even began. Supply chains were severed. Defenses disabled. The planetary shield, once thought impenetrable, collapsed from within. Before the first shot was fired, the fate of the Council was sealed. The last remaining leaders stood in silence, watching as the end came not with fire and fury, but with the slow, methodical dismantling of everything they had built. Their own people turned against them, their own forces defected, and as human forces finally arrived in orbit, there was nothing left to fight for. The Galactic Council, once the greatest power in the known universe, ceased to exist. Humanity never issued a statement of victory. There was no declaration, no parade, no demands. They did what had to be done, then simply moved forward. The war had been personal, but conquest was never the goal. They left the ruins of the Council behind, knowing the galaxy would never forget.